Thanks to you and thanks to everybody for coming today. We're so excited to highlight two of our amazing, dynamic, talented staff colleagues. So Maria Albornoz and Raymond Rorke are joining us, and we will be talking about their artwork and their roles at the Clay Studio. And we do have, we're recording, just wanted to remind everybody that we are recording today as usual, and that this will be available on YouTube publicly in the future, probably in a couple of days, because Josie gets it up on YouTube really quick, which is great. So I just want to start out by saying that the place where the Clay Studio stands and where I sit today is part of the traditional land of the Lenni Lenape. We acknowledge the Lenni Lenape as the original people of this land and their continuing relationship with their territory. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanend, that there be harmony between the indigenous people of the land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. Thank you again all for spending your lunch time with us. And I'm going to start out by formally introducing Maria and Raymond, and then we'll begin with our questions. So Maria earned her Master's of Fine Arts in Ceramics from Temple University Tyler School of Art, which I happen to know personally, and her BFA from the University of South Florida. Born in Kansas, she lived through her late teens in Venezuela and currently resides in Philadelphia. Teaching artist by day and ceramicist by night, when Maria is not throwing or coil building pots in her basement studio, she works for the Clay Studios outreach program as a community engagement teaching artist and as the community organizer for Making Place Matter, which is our project for the first exhibition in our new building. Raymond Rorke earned his degree in fine arts and English at the University of Pennsylvania, and then began working at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, where he discovered clay through their collections. He began taking pottery lessons at the University's City Arts League and quickly became the studio tech. His job at the University of Pennsylvania evolved to include gallery design and graphic design projects. Later, he served as the studio tech in the ceramics department at Penn, before he came to the Clay Studio as graphic designer 3 years ago, Raymond? 4 years ago.
I think so. It's only been 3 years now.
And
2017.
Yeah, that'll be almost 4 years. And he's also on the Making Place Matter team with myself and Maria and our colleagues. So welcome to you both. I am going to start. I'm basically going to ask the same question to each of you. So we'll move through kind of chronologically. So Maria, do you want to start by talking to us a little bit about when and how and why you made the brave decision to make your life in art?
Well, I've always been an artist since I was little. I was never into sports. So while everybody was playing volleyball in Venezuela, and that's the kind of thing that they do, I was drawing or collaging or doing something at home, so it's always been that way. But I did not think I was going to be an artist. It was always sort of like my hobby, because it's, in South America, it's not very, art is not like a thing you do. You do art, but it's not very encouraged. People are like, well, you need to
It's a career.
Yeah.
Well, I think it might not be too different here, but okay, got it.
Yeah. But like, I didn't even have a formal training until I moved to this country. So I started community college, like the second year I moved here. Like 2003. Oh my gosh. Yeah, something like that. And I started architecture. So I actually did architecture for 2 years, because that's, like, if I want creative, that's what they tell you. If you want a creative career, but you want to have a paycheck, then you should probably do architecture, because that's, the closest to art that you can go. But then as I was always taking like one art class on the side, because because you can. That's the lovely thing about this country and college here. So I kept taking an art class, and then I would take 2 art classes, and then I would take 3 art classes. And then I got to a point that I finished my first 2 years of community college in architecture, and they're like, okay, you're ready to move on. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I can't do this. All I want to do is just art. So I stayed another year, and then I took all art classes. And then that was it. I made my decision then. It was like the moment I had to leave to go to art, to like move on to the next 2 years of architecture, that I freaked. I was
So
like,
when you were going to lose it, when you were going to lose
I was
that
going to lose
access.
art. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
couldn't do that. And then back then I was doing painting and printmaking, and the traditional classes. I hadn't even taken ceramics yet. So I took one ceramic class, and that was it. So from being a painter, so I took a few classes of painting, and then just for the one class of clay of 3D that you're supposed to take in the first 2 years of art, and that was it. Like, it took over my life. I didn't
And that
want to
was
do
still
anything else.
Oh, that's so great. That was still
Still
at
in
the
the
community college.
Yeah,
They have a great
yeah.
ceramics program there.
I have to say, yes, and I had my community college, St. Pete College, was extremely supportive of artists, of their students. So like, I sold a painting, they like purchased a painting of mine, and they purchased a ceramic piece of mine. Like, it was like, they made you feel really good. Like, their teachers are like amazingly supportive. And then
Oh, you were in Florida. You weren't in Philadelphia yet.
I was not in Philly, no. And
Oh, okay.
actually, my painting teacher, Marjorie Green, went to Tyler, and she was the one that said, oh, you need to transfer to Tyler next. But I wasn't ready to leave my family. I wasn't ready to live by myself. So I just went to USF because it was at home, so I could stay with my family. And then I kept, doing art. But then I transferred to USF as a ceramicist. So then it was just ceramics then.
Yeah. And then you made the decision to come to Tyler for grad school.
So I came to Philly in 2010 for NCECA, and I never felt at home in Florida, and it's because I was raised in Caracas, and that's like a metropolitan city. And when I set foot in Philly, I don't know why, but it felt like home. Like, this is it. And then I went to the clay studio, and I also fell in love with the clay studio, and I was like, oh my God. So when I was officially emotionally ready, because I was probably ready to go to grad school before that, but emotionally ready to like leave, Philly was like my first choice,
Well, that's great. We're so glad you came.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that you felt like home. I feel like that about Philadelphia too. And the idea of coming to Philadelphia and having the clay studio be a big part of what made it feel good is a story that we've heard from our colleagues as well, right? I've heard Josie and Jen Martin say that too. So it's pretty special.
Yeah.
We just had, and then we had to get Raymond from West Philly to come over here to the clay studio. So maybe, do you want to go ahead and answer that question too, Raymond, about your kind of the time when you made that choice to make your life in art?
Yeah. Well, I just want to echo so much of what Maria just said, but also so many other artists you met on Lunch and Learn. We all have similar stories, but so it happened for me in stages. When I was a young child, I was in rural Pennsylvania, and I just grew up always like making something. And Joanna Powell said this last week. Like when I was outside, I would make things out of twigs and acorns and pebbles and leaves. And like, I remember one summer I spent the whole summer making this tiny village, like this miniature village out of, things like sticks and twigs and pebbles and things like that. And at the end of the summer, some of the older kids came and wrecked it. but then, indoors, it was the same way. I was just always making something. I would literally like carve erasers and mold things out of Kleenex and just whatever I could get my hands on. And then as I got a little older, eventually I used to be like, I made cards for my family, like for birthdays or Christmas or Easter, I would draw things and write things. And then as I got a little older, I was in Cub Scouts. And I remember once, you know how in Scouts you earn your badges by doing certain things. And I guess there was one for art or something. So for my art badge, I drew a ringneck pheasant in flight,
Oh,
and I took it to the Cub Scout meeting, and it won like an award, you know, and I got my badge, and but like one of the other Cub Scout kids there, I guess he was jealous or something, and he goes, "Oh, you traced that," which I was like, I couldn't have traced it. It's on cardboard. How do you? Anyway, after that, we went home. My dad was so incensed that someone would say that about me. And so he said, "Here," and he said, "You sign your name on that drawing, and you put the year down." So I did, and I went to bed, went to school the next day, got home. He came home from work, and there was my drawing. He had gotten it framed under
Aw.
glass,
no.
and he hung it on our living room wall. And ugh, that was a big thing. It was like he was so proud of me, and I just thought, wow, you know, yeah. So, and with that came some kind of responsibility. Like I was now the family artist.
Yeah, yeah.
It's weird because my dad always was good with his hands, and he taught me things like how to pour plaster and how to solder copper and how to wire electrical wires. And my mom, she always made beautiful embroidery. um I think it's a different stitch. It's called crewel. Is
Cruel
it?
work. Yep.
Yeah, where
Yep.
you blend colors together. And my dad would like do paint by numbers, like and I tried paint by numbers and I was terrible because I kept going outside of the lines. But they just did stuff. And my grandparents also my grandfather made beautiful birdhouses. Like, oh, you wouldn't believe it. They were just painted so, and my grandmother, she could sew or knit anything. And my mom could sew dresses. And so I was sort of raised and was in a family that just made stuff, but no one walked around and thought of themselves as an artist, you
Yeah.
know. So when my dad framed my drawing, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I eventually, one time for Christmas, I got a pastel set, oil pastels and special paper. And so I really took off after that. And so that was one stage. But by the time I was going in, by the time I was in high school and going into college, things changed, because in high school, we weren't really taught art. It was like every other Friday, the art lady would come in with her cart and with her construction paper and crayons and glue and scissors. And every other Friday we would have music, So it was sort of like, yeah. But I had a best friend in high school, and we used to draw pictures and trade them with each other. It was like our secret sort of skill. Like we just made jokes with it, and that was like our thing. But I think I always thought I really like drawing and I like art. And by the time it came to graduate high school and apply for colleges, I thought I want to apply to an art school, here in Philly. So I did. There was all kinds of art institutes and things like that. I forget, the Art Institute of Philadelphia, I think there was one called the Hessian School of Art or something like that.
Yeah.
But my parents were like, no way, you're not going to some fly by night art school. You need to be able to have a job and you need to, get an education. So we had a conflict there, and it was that similar reason, like, what are you going to do? Become a commercial artist?
Yeah.
Like, they were just not supportive of that at all. And I just floundered. I didn't want to keep going to school and learning geography and science and mathematics. I wanted to do art. And so, but then the problem got solved. It turned out that I won a scholarship, a full paid tuition scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania. And it was by pure chance because my high school at the time gave out a full paid scholarship to Penn every year. And each year it would change. It would be for the highest ranking boy in the school. And then the next year it would be the highest ranking girl in the school. And it so happened that the year that I got it, I was the highest ranking boy. I wasn't the highest ranking in the school because there were two girls who were higher ranking than me, but they were girls and it was my turn. So that just landed in my lap, and my parents were like, that's where you're going.
That's
and
amazing.
It was totally by luck.
Well, yeah, you luck, and you were still the third highest person in your high school, which is pretty.
Well, I was a good student. I was good at taking tests. I was just obedient and good at all that stuff. But I didn't want to continue doing that in college. I just wanted to break.
Your parents were also correct. Penn is better than the Art Institute, which now doesn't exist anymore. So, good job,
Exactly.
Raymond's parents.
So in my freshman year, I took the usual academic classes. I took psychology and biology and what was it? I even took a French medieval literature class, and it turned out you had to write your term papers in French. It was like, and then I put my foot down because you had to declare your major in your sophomore year, and I said, enough of this. I want to major in fine arts.
Yeah.
And I did. And my parents couldn't say anything because I was living away from home by then, and
you were. It was being paid for, and that makes such a big difference to parents. I mean, that's a lot of why the GI Bill helped so many more people go to school for art.
Yeah,
because they didn't have to. That group of people anyway didn't have to pay for it. Okay, well, we're gonna come back and pick up there soon. We're gonna go to Maria and start looking at images. And I'm also gonna say, Raymond, you still have your goatee filter on. You're just telling that whole story. I'm like choking up, and you had your eyebrows on the... Anyway, it's fine. It was a very moving story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, I'm gonna show everybody Maria's some of the images that she shared with us. Let me make this bigger. 1 second. Oh, I can do it. There you go, Maria. Do you want to tell us? So were these when you were in Florida or at Tyler already?
No, these were USF. This was the first project that I actually felt like, that I wanted to start documenting and that I felt really like good about. There were chain links out of clay, and they make this beautiful sound when they shift because it's square, and the weight sometimes they'll like move, and then everything, like the whole piece will like shift. So it's like sort of scary but interesting at the same time. And I actually kept making these after I graduated, and I've always worked on 2 different bodies of work at the same time. And I think it's because my brain has always done 2 separate things, because it's like my Spanish life and my English life, and it's like always been in 2s. So I've always been doing 2 things. And as I was doing this, and I finished college, and I kept doing these, and I was selling these at art fairs and stuff like that. And yeah, and actually one of these little guys is hanging at my one like moment at a tiny museum in Florida called the Lipa Ratner Museum, and in Tarpon Springs,
How
tiny
did
little
you,
town.
they're beautiful. How did you make them? Did you cast the squares and then in two parts?
I make the squares, and then some of them I do them in sheets, and then there's a moment where like some of them are glued to continue more sheets. So it's been a trial and error. That was like a crazy amount. The first one, I did the whole thing by itself, and I fired it in a giant kiln, and I put it on top of a wood board, which was a huge mistake. And then half of the piece was destroyed because of the warping of the wood while it's being burned. That was a crazy, but you know, it's like trial and error. And I did this project for a while. It was like a huge series, and I was really excited about it. So it kept me interested for a while. So they're like as long sheets as I could fit in the kiln, because like you can, since they're squares, you can put them move them really close to each other, you know. And then there are moments where you can see in the one connection. So I would do the C, and then the one last piece I would glue.
Oh, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, I was like, how did you put them? I couldn't understand.
I mean, some of them, they're whole sheets that are just clay, and then there's the parts that you have to like connect more sheets. They're very interesting, and I never figure out a good way to hang them. And I used to always put myself in like capers. So the first exhibition I did this piece, I had the technician of USF, Chuck McGee, like hold a box of these while I hooked them. Yeah, after I was done with this entire series, I feel like all of my friends were done with this like crazy adventures that I would put everybody to like hang these.
It's like you can't do it anymore because no one will help you anymore.
Yeah,
it's that point
actually,
in your life
yes.
when you have to pay somebody to help you move, because like there's that time where everyone helps you, and then there's a moment where you're like, nope, you have to pay the people now.
Yeah, everybody's like super supportive until they get to a point they're like, it's too much. The capers you're getting yourself in are too big.
Saying capers, that's a good word.
I had one time 3 friends hold up a board like this while I got into a crazy tall ladder to try to like hook them up. And now I think that was the moment where my friends were like, we're done.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I was doing this. So this is my social political work that I did for a while. And it was about immigration and about the issues happening to Latinos. And the path was about the path to like people have to go through to become national, to like get papers in this country. And you can't really see it here, but the path starts to crumble and get very thin and small until it's just dust when it gets to the end. And then the buckets was about the farmers in Florida, because it's like so hard for people to actually get a fair wage. And that's how many buckets a person has to collect in a day. And it was like $30 I would make, something like that, or 20 something, like I don't remember anymore. But yeah, so inside the buckets, and you can't really see it, but there's like a few pennies. This is really what each one is worth. So yeah, I was really into installation work and social political work until pottery started taking over. So it's always been that way. Like I really focus into something, and then a new idea comes inside and like takes over, and then I sort of like slowly move away. So this was in grad school, and this was my MFA, and it was about the food scarcity that was happening, that is in Philly, like the huge food deserts in Philly, but at the same time in Venezuela, we're going through that same issue about food scarcity. So it was something like that was happening, in both of my worlds. So I was like super passionate about.
Yeah.
And then this is just my inspirations, because I get inspiration from all over the world. Like for me, life is inspiring, and everything I do, and cityscapes I love, because I still have a huge passion for architecture, and nature I'm obsessed with, and plants, and I'm like crazy plant lady. So I just wanted to put like the things that inspire me on our little and I think that's New York.
Oh yeah,
So
it looks like me.
yeah, and I did not start doing pottery until I was in grad school. And when I started, I was lucky enough to teach a whole year in grad school, beginning ceramics. And when you first teach ceramics, you teach pottery, and I never made pottery. So I started making pottery because I was like, I got to teach pottery. And I fell in love with teaching so much. And the more I was teaching classes, the more I was falling in love with pottery at the same time. So I slowly shifted. So like, right, I had to leave grad school, which is interesting because I wish I would have come into this realization while I was in grad school, but I didn't. So then I left school, and then I started teaching classes all around Philadelphia. Like at the beginning, I was teaching in Philly, Fairmount Art Center, Abington Art Center. I was everywhere. I was at Claymobile. Which is I'm still at Claymobile, but I was just like, I would leave one place and get on a bus and then go to another place and then get on a bus and then go to another place. And I was just, and then the more I was teaching, the more I was making pottery. So I just started really loving it. And I've always collected other people's pottery. Like I always loved it, but I would make it myself.
Yeah.
And then I started making it.
I was going to ask about teaching and how that came into, so it was really just on your own.
It was on my own. It was Temple University. It was Chad and Nick Kripple that gave me, my class, because I'd never had taught before. And they're like, you're going to teach basics. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
An important part of grad school is just, I think, is being asked to teach. That's good. That's great. And so this is how your pottery is evolving.
This is how my pottery is evolving. And right now I am also doing 2 different kinds of pottery. I'm really into my landscapes, my abstract landscapes. And I just feel like it's like, like you're bombarded by information every day. And it's just like, this is what comes out. And it's just these beautiful like paintings on my white canvases, which are my clay pots. But then at the same time, I'm also, and this only happened during COVID-19, during this time, because it was very curious. And I think it was my boss, like Megan, came with this idea of making a coloring book. And I made this little drawing for the coloring book, which is the one side of my bedroom that I love. It's right in front of my bed. And every time I wake up, I see this little like vignette, and I love this. So I was like, I'm going to draw this. And then after I drew this, I was like, oh my God. And I used to draw a lot and I used to paint a lot, but I just never thought of putting all my passions together. And I kind of was doing it with my abstract paintings on my canvases, on my pots, but oh my God, like this is it. So right now I'm doing both, but I'm thinking probably in the future, I might just end up doing this because it's more challenging and it's more like, it like consumes me more. So
yeah,
it's probably going to take over. I'm seeing it.
It's beautiful. And that's Maria's house, which is great.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's so nice to just sit in your house and find these beautiful little spaces and corners. And I mean, the way you have your house is like artwork too.
Thank you. Yeah.
My house is not that clean. I guess when you're painting it, you can just not include them.
You can edit out the stuff you don't like. Yeah, that's what I do. And sometimes I'll put like a little piece of furniture that I'm like, I don't have this yet, but I want to get this. So I'm like, I'm going to put it on my painting.
That's a good idea. Dream the world you want. Yeah. Lovely. Okay, well, we'll come back to you to talk about your role at the Clay Studio after we talk to Raymond about his moments. Thank you, Maria. So, oh no, that's not in the right order. Sorry, hold on a second. What happened? Sorry, Raymond. Okay. I think I was finishing this while we were talking before. Raymond, do you want to talk to us about the next stage? So you were at school and then you graduated. And what Raymond said to me was he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, walked across the street to the museum and asked for a job. And they said yes. So I
Yeah.
think that's pretty lucky. And I have a feeling it was a little bit more than that, but it's a good story.
Well, yeah, literally. So when I was in college and studying fine arts, and I really took off. I learned drawing and painting and printmaking, sculpture and color theory and art history. And so the feet you see in clay is one of the sculptures I made from clay. Um, and I grew my hair real long, and I was totally in it. But they didn't offer ceramics or pottery or clay, but I had my hands in clay. Anyway, I graduated, and literally we graduated at the convention center on 33rd Street, Convention Avenue. It's not there anymore. They moved it downtown. And I literally walked out, took my cap off, took my gown off, went over to the museum next door and said, can you hire me? I know how to type. And that's literally, and the nice lady there said, yeah, we actually need a typist. So my first job there was I was a typist, and I would type the handwritten manuscripts from the curators and researchers there. They would come in with their yellow legal pads with their handwritten manuscript, and I would type it and correct their spelling and grammar so that they could submit it to a publisher and get published.
That was a very big part of academia for a long time, even when I was still in grad school and just getting to the art museum. That there was, not a thing anymore.
Yeah, and the only reason I knew how to type was because in high school they gave you a choice once. You could take typing or Latin, and I said, "Oh, I like both. I like languages," and I was already taking French, so I thought I'll do typing, and it turned out to be perfect because in college I typed all my roommates' term papers, and
Ooh, and they paid you probably. Neat.
I did it for free. But anyway, so I was at the museum, started out as a typist. And here's where I have to give a shout out to Denise, who's on this Zoom.
Oh.
One day I was walking home from work, and I was crossing 38th Street, and she was crossing from the other side, and we met in the median strip and had a nice little chat. And I was telling her about the museum and how I'm surrounded all day there by the ceramics in the galleries from ancient cultures from all over the globe, and how incredible it was. And she said, why don't you take a pottery class up on Spruce Street a couple blocks? And I was like, where's that? And she said, it's called the University City Arts League. So I said, okay, I'll check it out. So I went up there and I signed up for a pottery class. And at the time, well, you see, I didn't know that they had pottery because it was in their basement. And I guess whenever I passed by the building, I only saw the first floor, second floor, third floor, where they taught art, music, and dance and all. So I went down to the basement to take my pottery class, and I fell in love with it. I had an incredible teachers. I had Janet White, Diane Marimel was my teacher, and she became an associate artist at the Clay Studio later.
Yeah.
When I ran into her when I first came to the Clay Studio, I'm like, Diane, what are you doing here? And she's like, Raymond, what are you doing here? So we hadn't seen each other, but we were both at the time in the same neighborhood. She was on 45th Street, I think. I was on 42nd. And when she taught classes, at the end of the class, she would invite all the students over to her house for a dinner party. And we'd all bring our handmade plates and cups and bowls. And we'd have this nice meal and, wine and smoke some pot. It was great. I loved it. Diane was great.
Diane's not on the
And-
call, so she can't defend herself. We better be careful. So then
Anyway,
you,
so that
all of a sudden you were like, immediately they're like, why don't you be the studio tech? And you started teaching classes there, right, Raymond?
yeah, well, it's just like here at the Clay Studio, you know, once you get in and start doing it, you learn and you grow and you move on. So at the Arts League, you know, I was a student, a beginner, and I learned how to throw, and then I became eventually this studio monitor, which is another word for studio tech. I was firing the kilns, I was mixing the glazes, I was ordering the clay, I was mopping the floors, and you know, you start to learn all of those things about pottery and all the things involved. We also did a lot of, we did, we would take, we did a pottery sale every year at the nearby park, Clark Park.
What a coincidence. Aren't we having our pottery sale tomorrow at the Clay Studio?
Exactly. I feel like you guys, I'm in such familiar territory, but there's a picture of me during one of our pottery sales, and we would take the wheel out and do demos, and everybody in the, you know, the kids would just be fascinated by it. And you know, it was just great. It was just, it was just so, how do I say this? Clay was just so accessible to everyone. And, you know, the people that took our classes, you know, they were like med students. We had people that were in their 70s who had retired, you know, physics. We had total beginners. We had disabled people. I remember Hervita. We had a Native American, Wildflower. We had
Oh, and that's the letter that you have. You
yeah,
kept
that
because
letter.
her handwriting was so beautiful.
Yeah, so that was one of my students. Her name was Wildflower. She was Native American, and she wrote me beautiful letters because she was just so thankful and grateful, you know, that, you know, she was receiving instruction, and that, like, one time I submitted her piece for a show upstairs in our gallery, and she was just so amazed that that would happen. And I said, your work is good, you know. And so yeah, and yeah, so it was such a community of just all mixes of people, indoors at the studio and outdoors at the park. Anyway.
Yeah, I think maybe I feel like I mixed up your pictures too much, Raymond. Do we want to, is that an okay one to start with next?
No, that's fine. Yeah, so this is flash forward, and this is the kind of thing I'm interested in now. I'm interested in this fine dividing line between what an object is and what clay is. And that happened to me when I was a studio tech at Penn. And all day long, I would be recycling clay in the scrap barrels. You know, students throw their scraps in there and they dump their slip, their thrown pieces, you know, their leather hard scraps. And I fell in love with that. I loved seeing clay in all of its stages. And all through my clay making in general, I've always put clay first. That was the main thing I wanted to always express, whether I was throwing a piece or hand building. I just love this clay itself. I was always sort of disappointed that I would have to cover it up by glazing it. And I always tried to avoid that. And so when I was a studio tech, I actually literally scooped out raw clay from these buckets and I would fire those. And so that one on the upper left, that's a series I did called Leather Hards. And I developed a technique where I was able to fire these pieces, these scraps from the bucket, and still make them look like they were unfired and leather hard.
Yeah.
And these have been in exhibits, and people have walked up to me and said, how come this isn't drying, you know, like becoming bone dry? And I would say, they're not really leather hard, they're fired.
Yeah.
And the one on the,
I was going to say that did that lead to the your knowledge of knolling, or was that something that you had had thought about separately that, and the lower left is an example of that.
Yeah, the knowing happened with the one on the right. So what happened was I would collect these scraps and I'd put them on plaster beds to dry. And once they dried, I would just arrange them neatly just to sort of, make order out of it. And someone, or maybe I saw it on Facebook, they said to me, "Oh, you're knolling." And I was like, "What's knolling?" And knolling is spelled Knolling. And it's actually a technique of arranging things in very organized, logical ways. So I started looking it up on the web, and it turns out it's a thing. And the term was invented by a janitor who worked at the workshop, the Knoll Furniture Factory, where Frank Gehry was a designer. So every day, this janitor would clean up the drafting tables, desks with all their tools and everything, and he would arrange their tools and their pencils and T-squares and triangles neatly. And so the name knolling became known. And it turns out that knolling is everywhere. And it actually connected to me because at the museum, early museums used to display objects like this. Museums would collect a bunch of objects and they would arrange them beautifully in the gallery. Or, you could look at your kitchen drawer and see how things are arranged there. But if you go on the web, you'll see that there's a lot of photographers who will show like a motorcycle exploded apart to show all the different parts and they're neatly arranged. So artists use this technique a lot. Tony Craig comes to mind, but there's so many others.
Yeah.
So it's become an art form in itself. And I wrote about all this, and it got written up in Garth Clark's seed file. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty special. I mean, these we've had these in the gallery. They're so beautiful in person. It's a great photograph too. So and Knoll, which is Florence Knoll, was the designer for whom who started that company. It's in Pennsylvania, which is interesting. So we're running a little bit low on time, so I'm just gonna go through the rest of your images, and then I just want to make sure we talk a little bit about each of your roles at the Clay Studio because before we run out of time. But these look like in the studio at Penn, right? The work that you were doing while you were there.
Yeah, I took classes at Penn, and then I took classes at the Clay Studio before I even started to work there, because I would always go to the Clay Studio for First Friday and everything. So I would take classes there in the summer.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the way you photograph things and arrange things, which has a lot to do with the work that you do at the Clay Studio. And we're going to come back to you to talk about that in a second. And we'll talk to Maria about, can you tell us, Maria, a little bit about what your job is, your jobs at the Clay Studio?
my roles. So my the one that takes the most hours, let's just say that the bigger one is both are very important roles, but is my community engagement teaching artist, and I work for the Claymobile, and Megan, my boss, is around here, or she was around here a little bit ago, and we teach kids all around and adults. We teach everybody all around Philadelphia and the outskirts of Philly, and it's really great. And that's actually one of the reasons why I stopped doing conceptual, like social political work, because I felt that teaching people to do art did more than just talking about what was happening, in the world. So that was another reason why it was so easy to just like leave that behind, and then focus on teaching all my kids. I call them my kids.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense to me, because teaching takes so much emotional energy. And if you were then like turning around and making extremely intense social political work, you would have no release. But in fact, I would hope that the pottery can be the way you, for lack of a better word, you fill your bucket so that you have that energy to to give back to the students?
It's my my meditation, sort of, you know. It's like when I make my work, it's like my relaxation moments. But teaching is also very relaxing. Like I love teaching. Sometimes every once in a while you get into like the one, you know, the one class that's intense, but it doesn't happen that often. And after I teach every class, I always come back with this like spur of energy, you know.
Yes,
So it's
teaching
like,
high.
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So it's amazing. And it's really, you know, it's really good work that we teach people that don't have access to art. So
It's
so
so
I yeah,
important.
it's really great. And then my other role is the exhibition community organizer for Making Place Matter. And I also get to be, because it's weird, I'm very social, but at the same time a little bit of an introvert. It's weird, it makes no sense. But with my role, I get to talk to the community and I get to talk to people, and it's interesting because like right now with Zooming, because, you know, like we can't really do our face to face, so I don't have that connection with my students. But we still do it online, and we still talk to people online, and hopefully soon we'll go back to being go back to embracing each other and being face to face again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, maybe in the next meeting.
Count the days.
Yeah. And those of us who are Making Place Matter team, and we have Josie and Elizabeth and Anna are on the call too. I think we have our big meeting tonight with our council members, and it's been such an exciting project for me because we've gotten to engage the community who lives around our new building directly in talking about, you know, how and why really we're putting the exhibition together, and connecting them directly with the artists, which is not something that usually gets to happen. So that's fun. Thank you, Maria. Raymond, do you want to tell a little bit about your role at the Clay Studio and what's inspiring about it or challenging? Challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I couldn't be at a more perfect place than the Clay Studio. I mean, gosh, I get to do everything I've done previously in either my jobs or my clay work. And now I get to design for the Clay Studio. I get to work on exhibit designs a little bit, and I get to teach, and it's just like the perfect place. And the reason I love it there so much is because everyone there is so, I don't even know what word to use. We're so into it. We're just passionate about the clay and the studio and what we do. And we have such smart people with such experience. I mean, I feel so lucky, like with you, Jennifer, being with your background in craft history and your experience at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and your teaching experience. And I just feel like all of us, every day have these mind melds, where we're just all in the same wavelength. And we deal with people, you know, um, people that are at different stages of their art journey. And that could be anything from a little kid to someone who's just gotten out of college to someone who's been doing this for years. It's just what an environment. And I just love it. And I love the work that I get to do there because, the photos we have and the stories we have, they're all so true and authentic and different. And I feel like the more that the world knows about this and knows about what we do, the better. Just like with everything else, like none of us would have known about art or anything like this unless you came into some kind of contact with it and some kind of exposure. So I love the fact that we have exhibits, we have a shop, we have classrooms, and then we have outdoor events for free. People can come by and try the wheel, and they can watch us do wheel battles in public. And I just think, yeah, we're just doing the right thing. And if people can't come to us, we go to you with the clay mobile. You know, we go out to the different schools or different adult centers, and we just feel like you just get your hands on clay, and something will, you know, spark. Because I think we've all felt that, and we all know what it's like,
Yeah.
and we're all very supportive of different artists in their different parts of their journey. You know, you need studio space, you need support, do you need grants written, you know, do you need advice? And yeah, it's what a great place.
Yeah, I feel that way too, and it's being surrounded by amazing colleagues is a big part of it. And I think we all believe in the mission, and we think about the mission a lot to support artists and to support the community. And everybody works so hard. That's the other thing. I mean, I don't want to just ask what everybody loves about it and not leave room for the challenges, but it's because I feel like we're an organization that does more than the 17 people we have really anyone else would think we could do, because everyone works so hard because we love it, and that's why it's a great place to be. So yeah, thank you to you both. I really feel honored to be part of the team with you. So I don't know if everyone can hear my cats trying to get into my room. They're growling at the door. We are at our end, but I just want to make sure that if Anna, I'm looking at Anna's name as I talk to all of you, because I'm thinking about our Making Place Matter meeting. Maria and Raymond want to say anything else, and if anyone else in our group would like to take themselves off mute or say hello or say anything else that they want to add to our conversation.
Hi, well, I just wrote,
Since I said your name.
Say, yeah, maybe. No, I'm gonna mainly repeat what I wrote. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to get to know a little bit more of your background, like how in a way art was like what was in each of your destinies, I'm gonna say. And with, I mean, the story Raymond told us about the framing of this first picture is like, I really got the chills when I hear it. Thank you for sharing. And what a coincidence as well that you, Maria, have some chunks of architecture training in your brain. And I think those new objects you are producing, or you start producing during the pandemic last year, they have a lot of that also within them. Thank you. What an honor to be working with you guys.
Thank you,
Anna.
Thank you,
I have to
Anna.
admit, I kind of welled up too about my dad framing, but then I totally get what Maria just said about that high from teaching. It's so true.
Yeah, that's a good feeling. I definitely got that from when I was teaching at Tyler, and that's how Maria and I first met. She was in my class. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a lovely day. I don't think much could beat this wonderful conversation where we got to learn more about our colleagues, but we can try. Go out in the sunshine and enjoy your day. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Maria.
thanks.
Bye, Raymond.
Thanks.